I have shared tears of joy with this woman and tears of sorrow. We've shared tremendous hurt and joy in amounts that is absolutely beyond measure. I've known her for more than 2 years now, and I'm better for it. Pastor Sandy is compassionate, an incredible listener, and an all-around great friend. Anyone who knows Pastor Sandy is better because of her. Pastor Sandy Larson is one of the chaplain at Mericare Hospital in Fargo, North Dakota. I met Pastor Sandy at the most horrible moment in my life, the day that my husband and I lost our twin boys. The nurse had come into our room and asked if we wanted the hospital chaplain to come up and visit with us, and in my completely numb state, I said yes. A few moments later, there was a soft knock at the door, and in walked this small, quiet woman wearing dress clothes, a pantsuit with a sweater. She came and stood next to my bed. She took my hand and she introduced herself as Pastor Sandy, the on-call chaplain at the hospital that day. She immediately told me how sorry she was for our loss. Pastor Sandy sat with us and prayed. She listened as we answered her soft questions about the twins, about the pregnancy, and our fond memories of their very short lives. I couldn't believe how I was opening up to this complete stranger, and yet she was so kind and so compassionate. She was sharing in our joy as we talked about how excited we were to find out that we were having 2 boys, and she also shared in our tears when we learned that something was going very wrong. She offered to do a blessing for our twin boys right there in the hospital, and that's something that I am eternally grateful for. Pastor Sandy's compassion reached just beyond my husband and I. When family or friends would come to visit us in the hospital, she would greet them and visit them, and she would share her condolences with them as well. Pastor Sandy checked on me many times during those several days that I stayed in the hospital. And she came and prayed with us before we left the hospital to go home. She gave us her card before we left, and she said if we ever needed anything, that we should just call and that she would be there for us. 1.5 years later, I find myself back at Mericare Hospital, back in the labor and delivery ward, at almost the same point in this pregnancy as I was with the twins the last time I was there. This time I was being hospitalized for long-term bed rest, and I was scared out of my mind. My first thought was to ask the nurse if Pastor Sandy was still working with the hospital. She said that she was, and so she called down and had Pastor Sandy come up. When Sandy walked into my room, we shared hugs and tears, remembering why we had been together before and why we were together now. Pastor Sandy seemed to make it her personal mission to keep my spirits up while I laid in the hospital all those months. She would visit me every day that she possibly could, listening to me complain and worry endlessly. During her visits, we would talk about everything under the sun. We talked about the weather and her grandkids, her husband, my dog, the baby, of course, and we would remember the twins. There were days when Pastor Sandy just knew that I needed to cry, so she would sit and listen and hold my hand and offer prayer before she left. I always felt such a sense of calm after our visits. The day that I gave birth to my daughter, Pastor Sandy came zooming up from her office. She was so excited to finally meet the little girl that we had been praying for all those months. Watching Pastor Sandy hold my daughter was such a joy. Seeing the happiness and joy in her face was incredible. I was so happy that I could share such a great moment with somebody who had become so special to me. Pastor Sandy had become a very special friend, somebody I definitely want my daughter to know growing up. We try to visit Pastor Sandy whenever we make it to Fargo. We'll stop at the hospital, and Pastor Sandy will ooh and ah over Olivia, how big she's gotten. And of course, Olivia will reward her with a great big smile. Pastor Sandy is such an incredible soul. She's always finding the good in things, and she wants to share them with others. Just like any other friend, Pastor Sandy loves to share fun and goofy stories about things that happened to her during her day. And we would talk about our favorite TV shows, the books we were reading. We would share candy, even though I wasn't supposed to have candy. And we spent an hour one afternoon trying to figure out her new iPod. Pastor Sandy's laugh is so genuine, you just can't help but laugh right along with her. Pastor Sandy has a way with words, and she seems to know just when to say something. In every single one of Pastor Sandy's prayers, she would remind me that God is nowhere that we are not. That there's nowhere that I could possibly be that God is not right there with me. I really needed that reminder, especially in my darker days. She would remind me that God is closer than our very next breath. And that even while I laid in that hospital room, when sometimes I felt like I was all alone, God was right there with me. I was never alone. Pastor Sandy knew when we could pray for silly things, like a Dairy Queen M&M blizzard. And she also knew when we needed to pray for more serious things, like when a family friend of mine passed away from lung cancer. In her own amazing way, she could combine the silly things and the serious things in the very same prayer, and we knew that we were getting the job done. Oftentimes, Pastor Sandy would hold my hand during our prayers, and sometimes she would want to hold her hand on my protruding belly. And during the prayers, I would always take a peek at Pastor Sandy, because sometimes Olivia, from inside me, would kick at Pastor Sandy's hand, and I would see Pastor Sandy peek out with one eye at my belly, and then she would see me watching her, and we would break out into giggles in the middle of a prayer. There are so many things I love about Pastor Sandy Larson. She's compassionate, a marvelous listener, a great friend, and she has a definite way with words. Everyone I have met who knows Pastor Sandy says the same things about her, and it's so obvious to me why so many people adore her. Sandy Larson is somebody I definitely want my daughter to know growing up. She's an incredible woman and a great mentor. Thank you.